Welcome to our channel, where the heart of Africa beats in every story. Here we bring you captivating tales filled with rich culture, deep emotions, and unforgettable characters. Each story offers a journey through love, conflict, and the supernatural, revealing the truths of our humanity. If you crave adventures that resonate with your spirit and soul, you're in the right place. Join our community and subscribe now to be part of the magic as we explore the enchanting world of Nollywood storytelling. Let's embark on this journey together. In the vibrant small town of Anang, there lived a boy named Saviour. He was a quiet, thoughtful child, known to everyone in the village. Saviour grew up in a loving home, surrounded by his family. His father, Mr. Bidemi, was a well-known farmer and a skilled hunter, respected throughout Anang for his success and hard work. Saviour's mother was a trader, and his older brother was learning to follow in their father's footsteps as an upcoming farmer and hunter. From an early age, Mr. Bidemi taught both of his sons everything he knew about farming and hunting. He believed that these skills were essential for their survival and future in the community. Each day, the family would head out into the fields or the forests, practicing their skills. Saviour, his brother, and their father would go out for shooting practice, learning how to handle a gun with precision. Over time, the boys became skilled shooters. Saviour, in particular, became well known for his sharp aim and bravery. When they went hunting, it was often Saviour who brought home the largest animal, earning the admiration of the entire village. Life in Anang was peaceful, and the townspeople were proud of Saviour and his family. But one evening, something terrible happened, something that no one could have ever expected. It was a beautiful evening, with the sun slowly setting and casting a warm glow over the village. The birds were singing in the trees, and everything seemed calm. Suddenly, the peace of the evening was shattered by the sound of 3 gunshots coming from Mr. Bidemi's house. The villagers, startled and alarmed, rushed toward the house to see what had happened. When they arrived, they were met with a shocking sight. Saviour stood still, holding his father's gun in his hands, staring down at the bodies of his family. His father, his mother, and his brother all lay dead at his feet. The villagers gasped in horror and confusion. How could this have happened? Why had Saviour killed his family? One of the village elders, overcome with shock, cried out, "This is an abomination! How could he do this?" The villagers began whispering among themselves, trying to make sense of the tragedy. One person said, "We warned Mr. Bidemi not to teach this boy how to shoot. Now look at what has happened." Another villager, shaking their head in disbelief, muttered, "Could it be that Saviour is possessed by an evil spirit? How else could he kill his own parents?" Despite the barrage of questions and accusations, Saviour didn't say a word. He stood there, silent and still, his eyes wide with confusion and shock. It was as if he didn't even understand what had happened. No matter how many times the villagers asked him what had occurred, Saviour remained mute, staring at the scene before him. Minutes later, the police arrived at the scene. They quickly assessed the situation, seeing the bodies of Saviour's family lying lifeless on the ground and Saviour still holding the gun. The officers approached him carefully, asking him what had happened. But like before, Saviour didn't respond. His silence left everyone puzzled and uneasy. With no explanation from Saviour and the evidence pointing to him as the one who pulled the trigger, the police had no choice but to arrest him for murder. They gently took the gun from his hands, placed handcuffs on his wrists, and led him away. Saviour didn't resist or speak, only staring blankly as he was taken from the house where he had once lived happily with his family. The villagers stood in stunned silence, watching as Saviour was led away. No one knew what to think. Had Saviour really meant to kill his family, or was something more sinister at play? Was there an evil force that had driven him to commit such a horrible act, or had the years of shooting practice led to a tragic mistake? No one could say for certain, and Saviour's silence only deepened the mystery. The next day, the small town of Anang was still reeling from the shocking events. The air was thick with confusion and fear. The once lively village now felt cold and uneasy, with people whispering amongst themselves, trying to understand why Saviour would kill his entire family. The elders gathered in a desperate attempt to make sense of it all, hoping to find answers, but nothing came to them. They sat in silence, shaking their heads, unable to comprehend what had happened. Parents began warning their children to stay far away from Xavier if they ever saw him. His name, once spoken with pride and admiration, now carried fear. "Stay away from that boy," they would say. "He's dangerous." The whole village was on edge, and no one felt safe. Back at the police station, Xavier sat in an interrogation room, still silent. The inspector, trying to be patient, leaned forward and spoke gently to him. "Xavier, can you please tell me what happened yesterday? Who killed your family? Did you shoot them, or was someone else involved? Maybe they tried to frame you. Just tell me. I promise I won't hurt you." The inspector waited, hoping for a response, but Xavier remained mute, staring blankly at the floor. The inspector sighed, his frustration growing. He had tried every approach, but nothing seemed to break through Xavier's silence. The police officers gathered outside the room were deeply disturbed by Xavier's unbreakable silence. They began to whisper amongst themselves, speculating about the boy's innocence. Could it be that this boy didn't do it? Maybe someone else killed his family and used some kind of spell to make him dumb so he can't talk, one officer suggested. Another officer nodded. "It's possible. We have no idea what really happened. This silence is too strange." One officer, after much thought, suggested, "Maybe we should take him back to his house. Maybe being there will jog his memory or trigger something that will make him speak." The others agreed, hoping this plan might finally bring some answers. They prepared to take Xavier back to the house where his family had died, praying that the familiar surroundings would break his silence. Back in the village, fear had taken over. The once peaceful town of Anang had become a place of dread. People spoke in hushed voices, and many parents no longer slept at night, staying on guard in case their own children might turn on them like Xavier had. The fear was overwhelming, and the community was gripped by paranoia. The atmosphere was thick with unease, and no one felt truly safe. The following morning, the police escorted Xavier back to his family home. As they approached, tension filled the air. The house, once a place of warmth and life, now stood like a haunted reminder of the tragic events. Just as they were about to enter, something strange happened. A young woman, who had been fetching water from a nearby well, suddenly began acting strangely. She twisted and convulsed, her face contorting as though she was being controlled by something dark and unnatural. Her movements were unnatural, almost as if she were transforming into a monstrous version of herself. Her husband, hearing the commotion, rushed to the scene, desperate to help his wife. But before he could reach her, Xavier suddenly yelled, "No, don't go close to her!" His voice cut through the air like a knife, startling everyone, especially the police. It was the first time Xavier had spoken since the tragedy, and everyone froze in shock. The officers stared at him, their eyes wide with disbelief. Xavier, his voice urgent and filled with certainty, continued, "Do not touch her, or else you will be infected too." The words echoed in the silence as everyone stood frozen in place, unsure of what to do. The husband, confused and frightened, hesitated, unsure whether to move closer or listen to the boy who had just killed his family. Before anyone could react further, Xavier moved with surprising speed. He snatched one of the officer's guns and, without hesitation, aimed at the woman who was still convulsing and manifesting in front of them. In a single swift motion, he pulled the trigger, and the woman fell to the ground, lifeless. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the village. The husband collapsed to the ground, crying out in anguish as he held his wife's lifeless body. His wails filled the air, mixing with the shock and confusion of the bystanders. The police stood stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Xavier, now holding the gun, stood over the woman's body, his face calm but serious. No one knew what to say. Xavier had spoken, but his actions had only deepened the mystery. What had happened to the woman? Why had Xavier known what to do? And most of all, what was really going on in the town of Anang? The questions hung in the air, unanswered, as the villagers and police stared at the scene before them, unsure of what to do next. The policeman, realizing the gravity of what had just happened, rushed towards Xavier, quickly taking the gun from him and cuffing him once more. They didn't want to risk another innocent life being lost. The tension in the air was thick, and everyone around was still reeling from the shock of the woman's death. The grieving husband, devastated by the loss of his wife, ran to Xavier, tears streaming down his face. He grabbed Xavier by the shirt, sobbing, and screamed, "Why? Why did you kill her? She was innocent." Xavier, staring into the man's sorrow-filled eyes, quietly responded, "I had to do what I had to do to protect everyone from the danger that's coming to this community." The husband, still furious and filled with grief, began shaking Xavier, pulling at him in desperation. But the police quickly intervened, pulling the man away from Xavier. They tried to calm him down as he continued to weep, his cries echoing in the silence. The inspector, visibly shaken but trying to maintain his composure, asked Xavier again, "Why did you kill that woman, Xavier? What are you talking about?" His voice was firm but laced with confusion. Xavier, still calm but clearly overwhelmed, looked at the inspector and said, "You should be more worried about the danger that's coming to this community, not me." The officers exchanged confused glances, trying to piece together what Xavier was saying. The inspector pressed on, "What are you talking about? What danger?" Xavier, visibly distressed, finally began to open up. "The reason I've been silent all this time," he began, "is because I was in shock from what happened to me. You all know my father, Mr. Bedemi, the famous hunter. He had already seen this danger coming. He warned us to be careful, but none of us realized how serious it was until it was too late." He paused for a moment, his eyes distant as though reliving the horror of that day. The officers stood in silence, listening intently. "That day," Xavier continued, "my mother had just come back from the market. She was preparing my father's favorite meal with the meat I had caught during our last hunt. She went to the well to fetch water for cooking, and everything seemed normal. My brother and I were watching her, excited for dinner. But then, she drank some of the water from the well because she was thirsty. That's when it all started." Xavier's voice trembled slightly as he recounted the nightmare. At first, nothing seemed wrong, but then, out of nowhere, she began to change, just like that woman today. She started convulsing, acting strangely. My brother tried to calm her down, but she bit him. He got infected with whatever was in her. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. We had no idea what was happening. The police and the villagers listening to the story were stunned. Xavier's words painted a picture of something far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. "My father came home from the farm just then," Xavier continued, "and saw what was happening. He dropped his gun and tried to help them, but it was too late. My mother bit him, and he got infected too. I stood there frozen, watching my family turn into something monstrous. My father, struggling against whatever was taking over his body, shouted at me, 'Xavier, pick up that gun and end this now.' Xavier's voice broke as he recalled the moment. I couldn't do it. I cried out, 'Dad, I can't shoot. Isn't there another way to stop this?' But my father, he said, 'There is no other way. If you don't stop this now, this virus will spread and it will wipe out everyone in this community.' Tears welled up in Xavier's eyes as he continued. I watched my family suffer, and I was helpless. My father's last words were a command. 'Xavier, pick up the gun and shoot.' I didn't know how I managed to move, but somehow I picked up the gun. The next thing I remember was the sound of gunshots, and my family lying dead before me." The officers stood in stunned silence, processing the horrific tale Xavier had just revealed. Xavier, now trembling, looked at them with desperation. "I didn't want to kill them. I had no choice. And now, whatever that was, it's here in this village. It's spreading. The earlier we come together and stop this, the better chance we have of saving ourselves." The inspector, shaken by the story, spoke softly. "Are you saying this? Infection is going to spread? That more people will turn like your family and that woman?" Xavier nodded slowly. "Yes, and if we don't act fast, this village will be wiped out." Hearing Xavier's story, the police officers felt a deep sense of fear creeping over them. They exchanged nervous glances, wondering if they could be the next victims of this mysterious virus. However, Xavier, now emboldened by his mission, told them firmly, "This is not the time to be afraid. It's the time to act. We need to save ourselves and this community before it's too late." The officers, recognizing the urgency in his voice, steadied themselves and decided to release him from the handcuffs. Xavier, now free, began to strategize with them. At that moment, the man whose wife had been shot stepped forward, visibly shaken, but now more understanding of Saviour's actions. "My wife and I had just come back from the farm," he explained, "and she drank water from the well. Right after that, she started acting strange, just like Saviour said. But how is this possible? People have been drinking from that well for years, and nothing like this has ever happened." The group stood in silence, the reality of the situation sinking in. Whatever was happening, it had to be connected to the water. Word spread quickly among the villagers, and they became even more alert, preparing themselves for any signs of the infection spreading. They knew now to avoid the well, but the fear of the unknown still gripped them. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Saviour and the policeman decided to investigate the well. They devised a plan to test the water to see if it was truly the source of the virus. Bringing along a goat to serve as an experiment, they approached the well with caution. One of the police officers, wearing gloves for protection, carefully drew water from the well. With everyone watching anxiously, he gave the water to the goat. The moment the goat drank the water, it began convulsing, just like the woman and Saviour's family. It twisted and thrashed about violently, and within seconds the transformation was apparent. The group watched in horror as the police officer, not wanting to take any chances, quickly drew his gun and shot the goat dead. The scene left everyone standing there, stunned and deeply perplexed. It was now undeniable. The water was tainted, and it was causing this monstrous infection. In the days and weeks that followed, Saviour and the police worked tirelessly to contain the situation. They had already closed off access to the well, warning the villagers not to drink from it under any circumstances, and thankfully, everyone heeded the warning. But closing the well wasn't enough. They needed to find a permanent solution before the virus spread further or found another source to infect people. Desperate to find answers, the police and Saviour reached out to professional doctors, scientists, and researchers, calling on experts to help identify the virus in the water and hopefully develop a cure. They knew that time was running out and the stakes were high. As the experts arrived in the village, equipped with advanced tools and knowledge, they immediately began conducting research on the mysterious virus. Days turned into weeks as they worked around the clock, testing samples, analyzing data, and trying to pinpoint the origin of the contamination. The villagers remained cautious, doing everything they could to stay safe, while Saviour and the police stayed close to the researchers, anxiously awaiting any updates. The battle to save the village was far from over, but with everyone now aware of the danger and united in their effort to stop the virus, there was a glimmer of hope. The researchers, after collecting samples of the water from the well, conducted a thorough investigation and found that a deadly and highly contagious virus had contaminated the water. The next step was figuring out how this virus had gotten into the well. After closely observing the well, the experts made a shocking discovery. A deadly monster was living inside. It appeared the creature might have fallen into the well and decided to remain there, polluting the water and spreading the virus. When the news reached the villagers, fear swept through the community, but Saviour refused to let it break their spirits. Instead, he gathered a team of skilled hunters from the surrounding areas. Together, they spent days planning and preparing for the final showdown with the monster, determined to end the terror that had gripped their town. After 3 days of intense preparation, the group was ready. On a calm evening, under the fading light of the day, they moved toward the well with precision and determination. They set traps around the well, carefully drying up the water to force the creature out. Once the well was empty, they began throwing fire down into its depths, hoping to flush the monster out. Suddenly, the creature emerged, furious and monstrous in size. It roared, shaking the ground beneath them, and the hunters knew the battle had begun. Armed with their weapons, they attacked the beast with everything they had. The fight was intense, and some brave hunters lost their lives, but their efforts were not in vain. After a fierce battle, they finally succeeded in killing the monster. The villagers, filled with relief and gratitude, praised Saviour for his courage and leadership. He had truly become the saviour of the Anang community. Peace, love, and happiness were restored to the village, and the virus that had once threatened their existence never appeared again. It was a victory that would be remembered forever, and Saviour's heroism was recorded in the history books. Not just for saving Anang, but for protecting the world from a terrifying threat. In response to the crisis, the government stepped in and provided the village with clean, drinkable water by constructing a borehole. The contaminated well was sealed off permanently, ensuring no one would ever drink from it again. In recognition of Saviour's bravery, the government awarded him a full scholarship to pursue any level of education he desired. They also gave him opportunities that allowed him to live a better life, lifting him from the trauma of losing his family and giving him hope for the future. Saviour's life would never be the same, but he had emerged stronger, carrying the memory of his parents and the victory over the monster as a testament to his resilience and courage. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating stories. See you next time, and goodbye.